Well, I hope you are able to see the Word file and me as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay, fine. So today we are going to start with the Marxist history idea. And in this, we will be discussing about two important Marxist historians. There, Marxist interpreting history we have already discussed in the first semester. That is, the materialistic interpretation of history, where Marx emphasizes that Shaili, you are from English medium?
Yes,
Yes?
yes.
Okay, fine. So in the last semester, we already discussed about the Marxist way of interpreting history, where Marx believed that behind all the historical event, the reason is material, that is economic reason. And with that attitude, with that perspective, a number of historians have written history. Marxist way of looking at history has influenced the history writing all over the world. And India, after in post-independence period, even till now, Marxist historian, they have kind of a very significant influence, very significant contribution in the history writing. However, that does not mean that all these historians they have accepted whatever Marx said. They did had certain differences with Marx, like D.D. Kosambi, one of the pioneer in the Marxist history writing in India, one of the very early work that he has done. He has interpreted history from the Marxist perspective. He did had certain differences with Marx analysis about the Indian villages that we will be discussing gradually. But more or less, they have accepted the materialistic interpretation of history, and that is what we generally club them together as Marxist historian. D.D. Kosambi, 1907 to 1966, he was born in 1907, and his father, Dharmananda Kosambi, was a very well-known Buddhist scholar, and he was invited to teach in Harvard. And as Dharmananda Kosambi went to US to teach in Harvard, he took with him his son, that is Damodar Dharmananda Kosambi. And from his father, he inherited those passion for learning, very sharp, versatile learning, and of course, humanism. He, along with his father, as he went to US, he graduated from Harvard, and there in Harvard, he had a combination of different subjects like mathematics and history, and apart from that, he also studied different languages like Greek, Latin, German, and French. And later on, he also acquired mastery over Sanskrit. So he was a genius of his time, no doubt about it. And he returned to India in 1929, and then later on, he becomes mathematics faculty at Banaras Hindu University. There, he quickly became very well known for his outstanding ability as a mathematician. And then he was invited to Aligarh Muslim University, where he worked for a few days, but then he developed certain differences with the administration. And he felt that here the atmosphere is too politicized. And then in 1932, he goes to Pune and there as a professor of mathematics. See, the interesting thing is that he worked as a professor of mathematics, but he made a very significant contribution to history writing. And all his training in the mathematics, very scientific bent of mind, very thorough analysis, that he applied in the study of history. And here he worked for a very long period. He mastered a number of fields and started writing. And it is from Pune that he acquired very, he became very popular. Then in 1946, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, in that institute, he was offered a chair of mathematics. And here he held that position till 1962. And here we see that if you take a look at his scholarship, he had made contribution to mathematics, statistics, genetics, oceanography, chemical engineering, and fluid mechanics. शाहिल अच्छा हिंदी मीडियम से किसी ने ज्वाइन किया है ओके आई विल स्पीक इन हिंदी वेल लेकिन वो कुछ स्कॉलर ऐसे होते हैं ना जो बहुत होशियार होते हैं लेकिन उनका वास्तव जीवन में उनका कोई योगदान नहीं होता है उनके ज्ञान का किसी को कोई यूज नहीं होता है डीडी कोसम भी उस तरीके से नहीं थे वो स्कॉलरली पर्सन तो थे ही वॉज एन एक्सेप्शनल स्कॉलर नो डाउट अबाउट इट लेकिन अपने ज्ञान का प्रैक्टिकल भी कुछ लोगों को उसका यूज होना चाहिए इस बात की तरफ भी उन्होंने ध्यान दिया उदाहरण के तौर पर उस समय मुंबई में हर साल बारिश के समय में टाइफाइड आ जाता था। तो टाइफाइड कंट्रोल किस तरीके से किया जा सकता है, ये उन्होंने सजेशन दिया था मुंबई म्युनिसिपल कॉर्पोरेशन को। उसके बाद में डैम जो आर्बिटरी तरीके से अलग अलग जगह पर उनका लोकेशन था, एंड दैट ही सेड कि इज हार्मफुल फॉर द इकोलॉजी. So, in that way, what is practically possible for the people, and will be useful for the people that he tried to explore. मार्क्स के विचारों से वो कहाँ तक प्रभावित थे, ये हम लोग अभी देखेंगे. तो मार्क्स के विचारों से प्रभावित होकर वो कहते हैं कि हिस्ट्री इज नॉट अ क्रोनोलॉजिकल रिकॉर्ड ऑफ इवेंट, neither it is a record of the work done by the great people. But what is more important to understand history is that प्रोडक्शन की प्रक्रिया में, उत्पादन की प्रक्रिया में जो चेंजेस आते हैं वो इतिहास को ज्यादा प्रभावित करता है. उदाहरण के तौर पर सबसे पहले ये हम लोग मार्क्सिज्म डिस्कस करते समय भी पढ़ चुके हैं. उदाहरण के तौर पर सबसे शुरू में मनुष्य जो था वो जंगल से अनाज इकट्ठा कर, फ्रूट इकट्ठा करता था या फिर शिकार करता था. तो मोड ऑफ प्रोडक्शन उसी तरीके से था. उसके बाद में हम लोग देखते हैं एग्रीकल्चर आया. सो एग्रीकल्चर इज अ डिफरेंट मोड ऑफ प्रोडक्शन विच हैज ब्रॉट लॉट ऑफ चेंजेस इन द ह्यूमन लाइफ, like people starting settling down, so on and so forth. Similarly, he also says that एक पर्टिकुलर समय में रूलर कौन था ये इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है, बट व्हाट इज मोर इंपॉर्टेंट इज दैट हाउ द प्रोडक्शन इज डन. उदाहरण के तौर पर वो कहते हैं कि मेटल की जब डिस्कवरी होने लगी, सबसे पहले कॉपर का मेटल मनुष्य ने इस्तेमाल किया. लेकिन कॉपर का मेटल जो है वो बहुत सॉफ्ट होता है, उससे बहुत ज्यादा स्ट्रांग हम औजार नहीं बना सकते, इम्प्लीमेंट्स नहीं बना सकते जिससे कि खेती की जाए. लेकिन जब लोहा आदमी ने इस्तेमाल करना शुरू कर दिया तो उसका उसका बहुत उसके मटेरियल जीवन के ऊपर फर्क पड़ने लगा. इट हैज स्टार्टेड अफेक्टिंग हिज मटेरियल लाइफ बिकॉज नाउ ही कैन क्लियर द ह्यूज फॉरेस्ट, कट डाउन द ट्रीज, make the land available for agriculture, and finally that use of iron, the implements made of iron can be more effectively used in the agriculture cultivation. So ये राजा कौन था, वो कहते हैं कि ये तो ऊपर ऊपर की सतह की बात है. जब एक्चुअल में आयरन का इस्तेमाल हुआ और उसके कारण खेती ज्यादा पैमाने पर होने लगी, उससे ज्यादा लोगों के जीवन में बदलाव आया. सो यू अंडरस्टैंड what with what perspective the Marxist people look at history. That is how the material situation changes, how the economic condition changes, how the mode of production changes. Like the implement that was used, the metal that was used for manufacturing implements earlier were copper, but the way when we started using iron to make implement, and that is used for making agriculture more extensive, that is a more important phenomena, that is a more significant event that had brought a lot of changes in the history of human life. The government policies का अपने आप में कोई महत्व नहीं है, but that is important to the extent it affects the process of production. Well, now some of the formulation of Marx he rejected. He was also critical of some scholar who accepts Marx as it is. For example, you know, मार्क्सिज्म हमने डिस्कस करते समय एक सर्कल मैंने आपको बताया था कि हाउ देयर वाज प्रिमिटिव कम्युनिज्म दैट लीड टू द एग्रीकल्चर, एंड देन zamindari, feudalism, and then capitalism, and now capitalism. After capitalism, there will be again a scientific revolution, scientific communism will come. That was the general circle that Marx has given us. So according to Marx, every society go through these stages. From primitive feudalism, it comes the stage of slavery. But D.D. Kosambi, he believed that the stage of slavery is not necessary. You can, from primitive communism, you can directly enter into the stage of feudalism. Slavery as an essential stage in the development of any civilization, as projected by Marx, was not acceptable to Kosambi. He also says that slavery was not present in Brazil as well. Then, next, a very important statement he makes is that he says that economic interpretation, or the Marxist perspective of history, it is a very important tool to understand the past, but it cannot be a substitute for your intellect. You can use it as a tool, but never blindly believe in whatever Marx says. Then Marx believed that there is Asiatic mode of production where the villages in Asia used to be self-sufficient, and but D.D. Kosambi did not agree with that. He said that villages did had a connection with the urban centers. It is not that nothing was coming from village to urban, and nothing was going from urban to village side as being, projected by Didi Kosambi. Then, he makes another important dimension of Didi Kosambi's interpretation of history is that he makes a combination of different sources available. For example, he studies coins. He studies archaeological remains. Coin is also part of archaeological remains, but coin has also developed as an independent branch of study. We have seen this in the last semester. पिछले सेमेस्टर में हमने देखा था जिसको कि नुमिस्मेटिक कहा जाता था. तो उन्होंने कॉइन्स का अध्ययन किया, नुमिस्मेटिक का अध्ययन किया, आर्कियोलॉजी की पढ़ाई की, टेक्स्ट, संस्कृत टेक्स्ट को भी उन्होंने स्टडी किया और इथनोग्राफी को भी उन्होंने स्टडी किया. इथनोग्राफी इज when you go and stay with the people and directly observe and directly take the notes, like ethnography is many times used for studying the tribal people, because tribal people, they generally don't have tradition of written sources. There will be oral sources. So if you want to study about their culture, you can go, you need to many times go and stay with the tribal, learn their language and try to understand what their songs and what their stories are trying to tell us, what their rituals are trying to tell us. All right. So he studied all these things, and he combined all these things to make his interpretation of history more precise. Like, in case of his study of ancient India, the study of coins was very, very important. And here we find him studying more than 12,000 coins that spread all over the country. And from that coins, he derived a lot of conclusion about the social, cultural, and economic condition of people of ancient India. And in a way, he laid foundation of modern numismatic in India. And at the same time, he also tried to verify these things, his finding from the Pali Buddhist text. And those verification had given us a lot of information about the Magadha Kosla king. Then he was quite aware that archaeological remain plays a very important role in reconstructing history. And he has done a lot of archaeological work himself, especially, of the proto-history period. Proto-history period किसको बोलते हैं? कि प्री हिस्ट्री पीरियड वो होता है जिस समय का, जिस भूतकाल का हमारे पास में कोई विशेष साधन नहीं मिलता. हम निश्चित रूप से नहीं समझ सकते हैं कि आज से 10,000 साल पहले, आज से 50,000 साल पहले लोग किस तरीके से रहते थे, क्योंकि कोई हमारे पास में प्रूफ नहीं है. तो उसको कहा जाता है प्री हिस्ट्री, जिसका कोई प्रूफ नहीं है. और हिस्टोरिकल पीरियड मतलब वो पीरियड होता है अबाउट विच वी गेट सर्टेन एविडेंसेस, वी कैन अंडरस्टैंड how the people were living, and in between these two there is a period that is called proto history period. All right. सो ही वर्क इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, क्योंकि प्रोटो हिस्ट्री पीरियड के बारे में हिस्ट्री समझना बड़ा कठिन है. तो इसलिए वो क्या करते हैं, मेगालिथ, माइक्रोलिथ. मेगालिथ मतलब बहुत बड़े बड़े पुराने समय में, जब पुराने समय के बहुत बड़े बड़े पत्थर मिलते हैं, जिससे पता चलता है कि वो नेचुरली वहां पर नहीं आए हैं, बल्कि लोगों ने वहां लाके रखे हैं. कई बार एक सर्कल मिलता है पत्थरों से बना हुआ, तो उसका क्या मतलब होता है, व्हाट फॉर इट इज डन. क्या वो बड़े बड़े पत्थर ऐसी जगह रखा जाते थे कि जहां पर किसी बड़े व्यक्ति की मृत्यु हुई है और उनकी डेड बॉडी वहां रखी है. There is a system of keeping stone where the dead body is buried among the Christians. तो क्या इस तरीके की प्रैक्टिसेस थी, तो उससे हमें थोड़ा बहुत उन लोगों के बारे में पता चलता है. लेकिन ये सारे काम में उस समय के इतिहास को, एंशियंट टाइम और प्रोटो हिस्ट्री समय के इतिहास को समझने में डीडी कोसंबी ने बहुत महत्वपूर्ण योगदान दिया है. So, because of his work, a Buddhist cave at Kuda were discovered. He used to go for his field work, and he also discovered certain inscription which he published along with his comments. Then, Sanskrit. He also understood the importance of Sanskrit text, and he said that literature, it is a product of his age. Its age. कोई भी विशेष समय की सामाजिक, आर्थिक, राजनीतिक परिस्थिति जो होती है, उस साहित्य में प्रभावित होती है, उस साहित्य में रिफ्लेक्ट करती है, प्रतिबिंबित होती है. इट रिफ्लेक्ट्स इन दैट लिटरेचर, एंड इट नीड टू बी स्टडीड साइंटिफिकली. And with that intention, he drew a lot of conclusion from studying the Sanskrit text. He also prepared critical edition of the Sanskrit text, like, Shatakartriya by Bhartihari. And he also wrote Parva Sangraha of the Mahabharata. Then he was writing preparing the critical edition of the Arthashastra, but he could not complete it because of his death. So that is about his Sanskrit text. Then ethnography, he said, ethnography is, as I told you, when you directly go and interact with the people and try to understand their culture and try to understand their tradition. So he said कि मीनिंगफुल यूज आर्कियोलॉजी से जो हमें फाइंडिंग मिलती है, टेक्स्ट से जो फाइंडिंग मिलती है, उसको इथनोग्राफिकल मटेरियल से भी कोरिलेट करना जरूरी होता है. folk tradition, oral tradition, myth that is prevailing among the people, उसको भी हम लोगों ने study करना चाहिए. So he gave he gave his mind and time to that also. And combination of this archaeology and ethnography, it's known as ethnoarchaeology. So in the study of ancient India, he very effectively made use of this ethnoarchaeology, that is, trying to find out what is there. For example, while in the temple, if you go in the Hindu temple, especially in the rural area, you will find that there is a stone. There are stones kept near the temple, and which are smeared with the red color, red sindoor. And he believed that this is an probably a remain of the sacrifice in front of the god. The animals, and very remote time the humans were also sacrificed, and that blood used to make those sacrificial stone as a red. And though the sacrificial practices had been reduced or gone out of use considerably, very rare now. But nevertheless, in memory of those sacrificial stone, the stones in front of the gods are being smeared with the red color. And that is how he used to combine the ethnographical material, textual material, and archaeological material, and finding from the coin as well. So generally in his study we find what are the things that he has discovered. He has tried to understand कि सिंधु सभ्यता का विकास कैसे हुआ था, कास्ट सिस्टम, जाति व्यवस्था कैसे अस्तित्व में आई, इकोनॉमिक रीजन बिहाइंड द ग्रोथ ऑफ बुद्धिज्म एंड जैनिज्म. ये एक इंपॉर्टेंट बात है. बुद्ध के समय में जो वैदिक धर्म था, उस वैदिक धर्म में हिंसा काफी आ गई थी. लोगों को यज्ञ करना पड़ता था, और उस यज्ञ में अपने पशुओं की बलि देनी होती थी, और जिसके कारण क्या होता था, खेती के लिए मवेशी नहीं मिलते थे. पीपल्स दे वेर नॉट गेटिंग एडिक्वेट कैटल फॉर द कल्टीवेशन. एंड एज बुद्धा टोल्ड देम कि वायलेंस इज टू बी शर्न फ्रॉम लाइफ, वायलेंस को जीवन से निकाल देना चाहिए. And when somebody become Buddhist, he don't have to perform that yajna and sacrifice his own cattle when the Brahmins come and ask them to perform what yajna. And that is the reason many people they took they got attracted towards Buddhism, and Buddhism spread. लेकिन बाद में क्या हुआ, बहुत ज्यादा बुद्धिज्म का प्रभाव इतना बढ़ा कि बहुत ज्यादा लोग जो थे, यंग, इवन यंग बॉयज एंड गर्ल्स, दे स्टार्टेड बिकमिंग मॉन्क एंड भिक्खुनी, भिक्खु एंड भिक्खुनी. जब ये बहुत ज्यादा प्रमाण में मोंक बनने लगे, तो प्रोडक्शन कम हो गया. एग्रीकल्चर प्रोडक्शन कौन करेगा, खेत में काम कौन करेगा. एंड to support monk लोगों को भिक्षा देने के लिए you need a people who are economically active. And Buddhism then became one of the important reason of the economic deterioration. And finally Buddhism का भी deterioration उसके साथ साथ में हो गया. तो ये मटेरियलिस्टिक इंटरप्रिटेशन जो है, या मार्क्सिस्ट जो कहते हैं करते हैं, इकोनॉमिक रीजन जो हर चीज के पीछे इकोनॉमिक रीजन वो ढूंढने की कोशिश करते हैं. एंड दैट इज व्हाट डीडी कोसंबी हैज डन इन केस ऑफ बुद्धिज्म एंड जैनिज्म. जैन लोग जो थे, वो एक्सट्रीम नॉन वायलेंस पे विश्वास करते हैं. तो इट इज वेरी डिफिकल्ट टू बी एक्सट्रीमली नॉन वायलेंट इवन फॉर अ फार्मर, क्योंकि आप जब एग्रीकल्चर कल्टीवेशन भी करते हैं तो यू किल सर्टन माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म. सो व्हाट इज द बेस्ट थिंग फॉर द जैन इज to become a trader, so that directly he is not involved in any violence. He is buying certain goods from there, from one place, and selling those goods to somebody else at some profit. Then causes behind the economic reason behind the causes of the Magadha Empire. He says that Magad was not only agriculturally fertile area. It had there was a mineral also, and that mineral can be extracted and used effectively. So it is that economic background of having a very fertile land, and as well as having a mines, that made Magadha a great empire. Then after Ashoka period, there was a rapid decline. Behind that also, he says, there are different material reasons, like the empire become very extensive, the war, it was stopped, and the people became, they were not used to war, and that became important reason behind the decline. Well, and he, like, we generally find that the Marxists, they were very bold in making assertion. For example, while studying Sanskrit text, D.D. Kosambi made a very bold statement that the Brahmins used to eat cow's flesh that were sacrificed during yajna. And that became very controversial because it hurt the sentiment of Orthodox Hindus, because eating the flesh of the cow is generally forbidden for the Hindus and especially not for the Brahmins. The flesh is not to be eaten by the Brahmin. But he took out certain evidences and made this kind of statement. He was also critical of Bhagavad Gita and said that by quoting Bhagavad Gita you can justify any action. And these kind of statements made him a quite controversial character. So after 90, after different studies, combination of coins, archaeology, literary texts, and ethnographical material, he wrote more than 100 articles, 1940 onwards, and all these articles are compiled up into three major works. That is, Introduction to the Study of Indian History, which was published in 1956, The Culture and Civilization of Ancient India, and Historical Outline 1965, and Meat and Reality, Studies in the Formation of Indian Culture, where he talks about how the Indian culture has came into existence. And all this work has revolutionized the history, Indian historiography, because he is considered as a pioneer among the Marxists in India. Uh, with regard to the West, and he says that the way of scientific historiography that is developed in the West, it cannot be employed in the East, for the simple reason that in the East, the country like India, there is a shortage of written sources. So we cannot implement the same kind of, same kind of method here. The chronology is not very dependable. Mm, his historical method, D.D. Kosabi's historical method is also is being criticized. It is believed that he is very critical about the Indian tradition, and in that way, he had played in the hands of the Western scholars. So that is about D.D. Kosambi, one of the important historian. We will go to the next important historian, next important Marxist historian, that is R.S. Sharma. In case you are having any doubt, or in case you want any pointers to be repeated, you can just put the question in the chat box. Well, so this is R.S. Sharma. I hope you are able to see the word file. And he is a person who earned his education, who earned his PhD in England, and he was first president of ICHR. You heard about ICHR? That is an Indian Council of Historical Research, very important apex organization which promotes research in history. It gives fellowship also. There is a little bit of his life history. Ram Saran Sharma, R.S. Sharma, he was born on 1st September 1920 in Baroni village of Begusarai, Bihar, and he was born in quite a poor family. He received his primary education in the village school. He had to struggle very hard to earn his higher education. And after matriculation, he joins Patna College, where he studied for 6 years, and then obtained his master degree in history in 1943. And then Patna College, he joins Patna College. Before that, he works at a college in Ara, and then after that, he goes to England to earn his PhD. Then he comes back and then joins Patna University, where he becomes head of department in 1958. The position he occupied till 1973. Then 1973, he joins University of Delhi as professor. And just 1 year before that, Indian Council of Historical Research that came into existence in 1972. And he became chairman of that Indian Council of Historical Research. And he occupied that chair from 1970 to 1977. He served Delhi University until his retirement in 1985, and he was departmental head for 5 years. And after his retirement, he goes back to Patna, and he remained there till the time of his death, where he was serving as a professor emeritus. Professor emeritus is given when you retire as a professor, but as an acknowledgement of your exceptional service, बहुत अच्छा आपकी स्कॉलरशिप अगर है तो यूनिवर्सिटी आपको प्रोफेसर एमरेटस बनाती है। ये बहुत कम लोगों को मिलता है, तो जिसमें आपकी सैलरी कंटिन्यू रहेगी, एंड यू कैन कंटिन्यू टू कम टू द डिपार्टमेंट, यू कैन कंटिन्यू टू टेक सर्टेन क्लासेस, उसको कहते हैं प्रोफेसर इमरेटिस। उनके लाइफ को काफी अवार्ड्स मिले। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, लंदन यूनिवर्सिटी का जो स्कूल ऑफ ओरिएंटल एंड अफ्रीकन स्टडीज है, ही वॉज विजिटिंग फेलो देयर। टोरंटो में वो विजिटिंग फेलो थे, विजिटिंग प्रोफेसर थे। जवाहरलाल नेहरू अवार्ड उनको मिला, कैंपबेल मेमोरियल गोल्ड मेडल मिला, which is given by Asiatic Society of Mumbai. Then Hemchandra Rai Chaudhary birth century gold medal given to him by Asiatic Society of Kolkata. The Indian History Congress gave him VK Rajwade National. हाँ, आप लोगों ने बीच में मिस कर गए क्या? मेरा बंद हो गया था क्या? हेलो, हेलो,
Sir, yes, sir.
बंद हो गया था ना? नाउ कैन यू सी मी?
Yes, sir, yes.
ओके, यस, ओके। Well, I hope you are able to see the Word file. Ah, well, okay. So, okay, I'll repeat one or two sentences. Asiatic Society has given him award of Hemchandra Rai Chaudhary Birth Century Gold Medal. Then Indian History Congress awarded him with VK Rajwade National Award. Then he was awarded DLIT degree by two institutions, that is University of Burdwan, which is in West Bengal, and then Central Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies, which is in Sarnath, Varanasi. So DLIT is a degree which is given to the person to acknowledge his exceptional contribution to the knowledge, and that is post PhD, after PhD. Patna University had made him Professor Emeritus, which I have already told you, and he was also, UNESCO committee for the Central Asian Civilization, and he was also a member of University Grants Commission. So very distinguished post he had served. And through his all this association, holding the post of head of the department at Patna and Delhi and this UNESCO body and UGC member, he tried to cultivate the scientific scientific bent of mind in the historical studies. And there are a number of important work that he has done. That is Shudras in Ancient India, Indian Feudalism, Light on Early Indian Society and Economy, Urban Decay in India, Material Culture and Social Formation in Ancient India. So in the field of Indian historiography, he was a trailblazer, and his first major work was Shudras in Ancient India, and it was his thesis for a degree of PhD, which was approved at the University of London, and it came out in 1958. And it was mostly written with the help of the literary source, and it was a kind of pioneering work which focuses on the Shudra community, that is laboring class in ancient India, from very ancient period, from Vedic period to Gupta period. And here he studied the changes in the relationship, how the mode of production changes, and how this subordination of these people being came into effect. Lot of disabilities were imposed on them so that they can be utilized for serving the upper caste. In this production process, how they become disabled. उनके अधिकारों की रक्षा नहीं की गई निचले जाति के लोगों को, but they were just used for the in this process of production. Second edition of this book came in 1980, which is more larger and quite modified version. And new evidences, new investigation that came through the archaeological and anthropological studies was utilized to expand this work. And he makes an analysis कि how ये जो ट्राइबल कम्युनिटी थी, प्री एग्रीकल्चर कम्युनिटी जो थी वैदिक आर्यन की, जो कि एक जगह से दूसरी जगह अपने मवेशियों को साथ में लेके जाते थे, ये जब सेटल होने लगी तो ये कैसे क्लास बेस्ड सोसाइटी अस्तित्व में आ गई. हाउ न्यू सोसाइटी बेस्ड ऑन क्लास दैट इज लेटर ऑन converted into the caste system has came into existence. And he says कि जो caste system is harmful to the society, it has developed during that period as a social and economic necessity. And शूद्र को क्या गुलाम बोला जा सकता है? वेस्टर्न कंट्रीज में जैसे ग्रीक में गुलाम होते थे जिनको खरीदा और बेचा जाता था, वो तो क्या शूद्र भी भारत के गुलाम थे? उनकी कंडीशन अलग थी, उनको खरीदा और बेचा नहीं जाता था. So that kind of comparison also he makes between the shudras in India and the slaves in the western countries. उनकी जो नेक्स्ट किताब है एस्पेक्ट्स ऑफ पॉलिटिकल आइडियाज एंड इंस्टीट्यूशन इन एंशिएंट इंडिया, it was published in 1959, and where it makes an analysis of the origin, growth and nature of the state in ancient India, how the state has came into existence in the background of the historical materialism. मार्क्स की जो थियरी है कि जो कुछ भी होता है इकोनॉमिक कारण के कारण होता है, तो इन इकोनॉमिक कारणों से ये जो स्टेट कैसे अस्तित्व में आया इसका वो अध्ययन करते हैं. This work has gone into several editions, and which each edition it has become richer with new insight, argument, and additional material. फिर उनकी किताब जो है 1965 में वो थी इंडियन फ्यूडलिज्म, and with the help of archaeological remains like engraving, copper plates, and imperial order, he made the study of feudalism in India and Europe. And here he explores, how that land grants given to temples, Brahmin, and official that has contributed to the growth of feudalism. And this book has created a lot of controversy. Again, it has generated intense debate in favor and against the ideas of R.S. Sharma. feudalism के ऊपर डीडी कोसंबी पहले काम कर चुके थे. डीडी कोसंबी के इस काम को आर एस शर्मा ने काफी आगे बढ़ाया. ही एक्सपांडेड इट फर्दर, एंड इट वाज अ वेरी पेनसेकिंग रिसर्च, काफी उन्होंने मेहनत की. Then next किताब जो है 1987 में, which is Urban Decay in India, and it reinforces his argument regarding the origin and growth of feudalism again. And he gives a lot of archaeological evidences about the decline of the urban center in early medieval India, and a lot of archaeological data that he marshaled about that gives information about the decline of the urban centers. And this is quite a crucial element in his thesis on feudalism. Archaeological findings has helped him a lot. And it's for this book that he got H.K. Barpujari Award from the Indian History Congress. And according to him, he says that the post-modern period was a remarkable period for the urbanization. It led to the growth of towns, handicrafts, and trade. And these towns have reached its peak prosperity from 200 BC to 300 AD. And after these urban centers, it started decaying, and the process it continued during the Gupta period. And the important cause behind this was that the European Empire, like that is Roman Empire, that mainly started declining, because this Indian Empire, Indian traders, they had trade relation with this Roman Empire as well as the Empire of China. And as these empires decline, there was a decline of trade also. The road connecting India and Europe became unsafe. The road connecting India and China became unsafe, and there was no trading activities, no mercantile activities, and that is the reason these urban centers started decaying after 300 AD. Material Culture and the Social Foundation of Ancient India, which came out in 1983. Again, this is a materialistic interpretation of the how society and culture of ancient India developed. And how from pastoral community, India has become a settled community because of the changes in the mode of production, that is coming of agriculture. And this coming of agriculture, with this coming of agriculture, the mode of production have changed, and this mode of production had led to the lot of social and cultural changes. Administration was developed, settled life. People begin to lead a settled life, and because of the settled life, different professions were also developed. Here also, like Didi Kosambi, he also says that the cattle was essential for the farmer, and that is the reason large number of farmers they join Buddhism. They became Buddhist because once you become Buddhist, you don't have to sacrifice your cattle. Then apart from that, he also writes about the slavery, women's position, institution of marriage, and all this is influenced by his Marxist thought. And the next book is Light on Early Indian Society and Economy. So here he writes about social and economic history, that is about caste, marriage, slavery, land grants, etc. And then apart from that, he wrote two books, that is Looking for Aryan and The Advent of Aryan in India, 1995 and 1999. And in his book, he rejects the hypothesis that Aryan were the, this is a hypothesis propagated by the Hindu nationalistic historian mainly, that Aryan were the main, basically inhabitants of India. And but he rejects this theory. He says that no, Aryan came from outside, like who has done that? William Jones. Yeah, William Jones. Like William Jones said that Aryans came from outside. He the leftists generally agree that the Aryan came from outside. Then apart from that, his another contribution is preparation of the textbook. Through his textbook, he tried to generally, it's believed that he tried to interpret history from Marxist perspective, which the Marxists themselves call it as a scientific perspective. And here, very simple, lucid language, he wrote textbook, and his important textbook, that is Ancient India, which was prepared for class 11 and published by NCERT, and then later on it was published as India's Ancient Past by OUP, Oxford University Press. And this book has become very, very controversial because, here he writes about the practice of beef eating among the Aryan, and he also claims that the Rama and Krishna are mythical characters. They have no historical evidences, and this is disliked by some people, and as a result we find that this book has discontinued. Then apart from this scholarly work, he was a great administrator also. He was head of the department in Patna University, then head of the department, then professor in Delhi University. And he took a lot of initiative in revising syllabus, and then he took effort in a foundation of Bihar Itihas Parishad, and he also inspired the formation of Association of the Study of History and Archaeology. And he tried to bring these two fields together. History and archaeology, they are obviously very related, and whatever finding that we can get from the archaeology, if you utilize it for the understanding of history, that is a great thing. And he was also involved in the other important socio-political work. For example, in 1948 itself, when there was a border dispute between Bengal and Bihar, he prepared a report on that dispute, and then the dispute was resolved. Apart from Didi Kosambi and R.S. Sharma, we have people like Romila Thapar, Irfan Habib, and Bipin Chandra, who are also who wrote history from this Marxist perspective. Now, if we have to sum up the salient feature of this Indian historian who has written history from the Marxist perspective, is that it has become a very great force. It started in the mid 20th century, but it has spread very extensively and done a very extensive work. Before them, it was mostly the political history that was gathering attention, but it is because of the Marxist influence that people became more and more interested in understanding economic and social aspect of history. That this trend does not give much importance to the individual or particular event, but they give more importance to the social and economic system. This Marxist historian, they have very systematically studied the system of agriculture, village system, Varna system, caste system. It was not there earlier. Earlier people before Marxists, they mostly focus on the dynastic based history. So these Marxists, they have broadened the scope of history. Now instead of state studying only political, you are studying society. Instead of soldier and statesman, big people like king, you are now studying about the common people. From political, your focus has shifted to economic and social, and political, of course, it remain in the background. And the large section who were neglected by the historians so far, they are being brought into the limelight, like R.S. Sharma's book Shudras in Ancient India. Dynastic history went out of fashion, and political history it served only a kind of framework. Then idealistic and romanticization of history, it has taken a backseat. Now people started searching more for the economic and social factors of human life. The concern with the individual achievement and failure, individuals are no longer remaining important. Value judgment, you just can't, analyze the character and all that. That became a outdated thing. You have to study the source, how the society function, and in the society, you just can't say this society is completely bad or this society is completely good. There could be certain good thing, there could be certain bad thing. So in the value judgment has gone out of fashion. Uh, Economic reason behind the development of all the important factors, like even the religion, Buddhism and Jainism. These Marxists have tried to study the economic reason behind the growth of a religion as well. Mm, They have also promoted, interdisciplinary study. Like in case of D.D. Kosambi, we have already studied that how he tried to bring the different branches together, like numismatic, archaeological, then ethnographical material. He even ethnoarchaeology. The combination of ethnography and archaeology was very effectively used. The Marxists have also tried to understand the origin of different socio-cultural phenomena like caste, urbanization. History writing became less formative, but it became more explanatory and interpretive. People are trying to interpret the historical event and not just give information about that. They have, by disagreeing with the Western narrative, they have also challenged the Western narrative. Like stagnation of Asian villages, as written by Marx, was challenged by R.S. Sharma and Romila Thapar and D.D. Kosambi as well. So this is all about the Marxist historian. We have studied about the two important historians, that is D.D. Kosambi and R.S. Sharma. You need to remember their books, what are the important content of the book, um, and where they agreed with Marx, where they differed with Marx, how R.S. Sharma's, he came into conflict with the ruling establishment. These people, both of them have hurted the sentiment of Orthodox Hindus by making statements like about beef eating, and Bhagavad Gita can be used. So, nevertheless, they had certain shortcoming. No historical tradition is perfect, but definitely they have enlarged the canvas of history. Now people started thinking more about the common people instead of the kings. People started thinking more about the economic and socio-political, socio-cultural aspect, socio-economical aspect, than just a politically formation of the and fall of the empire. So this is where we end our lecture on the Marxist history writing in India. In case if you are having any doubt, you can ask me. Otherwise, when will be the next class, I will let you know on the WhatsApp group. So I see no question here so far. So thank you so much. Have a nice day. I'll just wait for a minute or so in case you have